Hello, everyone. My name is Megan Krause, editor of manufacturing.net, and I would like to welcome everyone to today's webinar brought to you by LiveSource. The presentation today is called New Trends in Supplier Performance Management Make the Move from Tactical to Strategic. Today we'll join LiveSource and Data Incorporated, a global leader in automotive powertrain components, to learn how changes in supplier management practices and technology are changing the ways manufacturers manage their suppliers. You'll discover how manufacturers across the globe leverage modern solutions to get better quality, more innovative products to market faster, at lower cost, and with fewer supply chain disruptions. In today's webinar, our expert panel will discuss how to shift from manual to digital processes, closely track supplier information, boost productivity with best practices, and increase efficiency by centralizing your data. While you're listening to the presentation today, I would like to encourage everyone to submit questions at any time by typing into the designated comment section on your screen. Following the presentation, we will have a question and answer segment where today's speaker will answer individual questions submitted by members of the audience. Remember that today's webinar will also be available on demand, so you can view it again at your convenience or share it with friends and colleagues. You will receive an email with a link to access the webinar within the next 2 days. Now, I'd like to welcome today's speakers. Bo Hagler brings more than 25 years of high-tech product planning and strategy experience to LiveSource. Bo guides the company's vision and provides corporate leadership in the strategic areas of technology and research, operations, and performance excellence. Chris Dawson is the Senior Manager of Purchasing Analytics at Dana, responsible for global supply chain risk, systems, and processes. The analytics group also oversees supplier diversity and conflict minerals programs for Dana. I will now turn it over to our speaker for the presentation. Please enjoy the webinar, everyone.
Thank you, Megan. And thank you, everybody, for joining us this morning. I'm going to start off by defining what we mean by supply chain surprises. And then we're going to look at how manufacturers manage supplier performance and how these systems actually contribute to these negative surprises. And finally, I'm going to suggest a different approach through an integrated process, and then I'm going to turn it over to Chris, who's going to take us through Dana's journey to evolve their supplier management processes. With so many moving parts, how can you possibly know everything that's going on in your supply chain? Well, it's difficult because there are supply chain surprises. It's that one little thing, that unread email, that little white lie from your supplier, or that out-of-date spreadsheet that can literally bring everything down. And how can you plan for the next surprise when you don't even know it's coming? Do you know it's coming is one of the most important questions in dealing with direct material suppliers that every supply chain, purchasing, quality, and engineering department need to be able to answer at all times. There are 1,000 moving pieces associated to start a production on time and on budget. For example, how do you know that all your departments and suppliers are operating off the latest version of the bill of material? Have you ever had a supplier that's built a tool against an old version of the BOM? Any manufacturer that is heavily reliant on suppliers for highly engineered parts has got to be concerned about part quality. Part defects are difficult to predict, and a poor supplier can damage a company's hard-earned reputation literally overnight. In the automotive industry, we're seeing a number of OEMs are requiring suppliers to be able to deliver parts for 15 to 30 years after mass production. This can mean having to track thousands of tools across hundreds, if not thousands, of suppliers for years. Have you ever had to replace an expensive tool because you couldn't find it? And auditors not only want to see evidence of your company's compliance, but also of your suppliers. In recent years, we've seen auditors focus specifically on supplier certificates such as IATF. Not being able to quickly produce evidence of a supplier has the appropriate certificates can lead to a nonconformance and a lot of administrative work that teams that are already stretched too thin don't have time to answer. And too many of these nonconformances can lead to losing your certification and then potentially lost business. And finally, have you ever come into the office one morning to find out that a strategic supplier is going to miss a delivery, which is now going to shut down your customer's assembly plant for 24 hours? But then after you do investigation, you determine that the supplier had actually notified your team regarding the late shipment, but unfortunately the communication was buried in an email, or it was stuck in a spreadsheet. It went to an employee that was on vacation, or they just didn't read their email closely enough. All of these issues, can actually result in cost overruns, damage to your company's reputation, and therefore potentially lost sales, penalties, and recalls. Even companies that have gotten good at avoiding some of these more serious issues admit that they're managing their business in a state of firefighting, which is a crisis in and of itself. And that's no way to run a business, especially one that operates just in time. At the core of firefighting are many disconnected and complex processes associated to program launches. One of the more common ways to address these specialized processes is through spreadsheets that are shared with departments and suppliers that are sent by email and then stored on companies' internal shared drives. According to a McKinsey company study, 92% of spreadsheets are used by manufacturers, and 90% of these spreadsheets contain errors. I'd suggest that most spreadsheets are obsolete before they even get saved to the shared drive. And 48% admit these spreadsheets are difficult to use. But what's difficult is keeping a spreadsheet up to date across teams of people. And aggregating data across multiple spreadsheets to identify a potential problem is nearly impossible. So manufacturing companies are already spending millions of dollars on these complex enterprise systems such as ERPs, quality management systems, or program lifecycle management solutions. So why are we having these problems? Well, the first reason is that these applications have very different purposes, and the software providers are not motivated to integrate with other applications. So that leaves departments having to share critical information between themselves through emails and spreadsheets or sitting in endless meetings to make sure everyone's on the same page. The second issue is that most of these enterprise applications were designed for internal use. Many of them were not designed with the thought of having an outside organization to be able to collaborate with you. So again, this means that the departments are now having to share critical information, time-sensitive information to these suppliers. And I'm talking about bill of materials, RFQs, APQPs, PPAPs, nonconformances, tooling, and supplier schedules. Now, while this may sound hard enough, many of the customers that we deal with have grown through acquisition, which means that each business unit may have their own business systems, processes, and data standards. So this makes it nearly impossible to even make sense of the question, do you know what's coming? To address the complexities and managing new programs, you need a solution that brings all the supplier-related data and processes into a single platform. The solution should sit on top of your enterprise systems and should enable internal communication to departments to collaborate with themselves as well as their suppliers. The collaborative portal should recognize changes in one area and automatically initiate action in other departments and from suppliers to ensure all the departments and suppliers are working from the same version of the truth. And now, having all of this critical data in a single database is going to allow for the analytics to identify where the next supply chain surprise may come from. Now you know what's coming. I'm going to now turn it over to Chris Dawson, who's going to relay Dana's journey in evolving supplier performance from tactical to strategic. Chris?
Thank you, Bo. For the next few slides, I'd like to take you through Dana's journey from tactical to strategic. First, I'd like to give you a brief overview of Dana, just to give you an idea of the scope of the program that we implemented. Dana is a over 100-year-old company, made up over the years through several acquisitions, as Bo stated, made up of several different systems and processes globally. We are a very diverse global company with over 136 major facilities around the world in many different countries and on every continent, and made up of over 30,000 people. To give you an idea of our business overview, Dana operates in 3 distinct markets: the light vehicle, heavy vehicle, and off-highway markets. And here you'll see how the segments break down into those markets fairly evenly across off-highway commercial vehicle, light vehicle, and our power technologies business units. And then furthermore, just our breakdown within the regions. As you can see, we're fairly diverse again across all regions across the world. Given such a broad market and segment reach across all regions, Dana has several different technologies and products that we bring to the market, which gives us a very diverse supply base serving each one of these technologies. So what were some of our challenges in the beginning when we started to look for a purchasing system to help manage our supply base? As noted before, being such a diverse company, over 100 years old, we had multiple systems for purchasing, multiple ERP systems, and many quality systems used across the globe. We had no common processes and no risk management within purchasing that was formalized. And with so many different systems and no common processes, it made for no master data for Dana, and really it was either siloed or no supplier management across the globe. So what one buyer was doing in Asia may not have been known to a buyer in North America using the same supplier, and vice versa. And really all our buyers were managing their day-to-day that they have to do, plus trying to manage supplier data and risk and financials for all of our suppliers, really without having a common system to do that. So really they were just trying to keep their head above water on a day-to-day basis. So what were Dana's needs when we started looking for a system? First off, we wanted a system to be flexible to meet the needs of our global team. So being a diverse company in so many different regions of the world, Dana needed something that would serve all of those regions and be flexible enough to meet the needs of each of the local teams. We also needed a partner that was able to develop and grow with us. Being such a large company and across so many different systems and regions, we needed the ability for someone to develop a roadmap with us and take us into the future of being able to manage our suppliers and our supplier platform. Next, we wanted one global platform. We wanted one source of truth across Dana. So as mentioned, that buyer in Asia would have the same view of that same supplier as the buyer in South America or in the United States. So everyone had the same view into that supplier, whether it be from a purchasing standpoint or a quality standpoint. Next, we wanted to commonize our systems and eliminate the redundant systems. And this included the many spreadsheets that we were using at the time to collaborate and work with our suppliers. Next time, we wanted real-time data in one location, and we wanted to be able to integrate it easily. So we wanted to be able to take the data that we collected through LiveSource and bring it back into our Dana systems and use that for our own analytics and mix with our own data that we had internally to give us, again, one global source of truth. Lastly, we were looking to improve our risk mitigation program, to improve on our compliance, both internally and externally to customers and local governments, and eliminate waste and deploy common processes so that it freed up time for our buyers to actually drive value into the business. With that, the value that we see or have seen over the last 6 years with LiveSource We've been able to grow together to transform our organizations from tactical to strategic. We have deployed LiveSource globally across all purchasing groups and across all 3,500 of our production supplier locations to give us one source of the truth. Next, we expanded the scope from purchasing to quality. We've integrated the LiveSource quality modules. So that now we have, again, one global view into all quality issues. Whether you're in our purchasing department or quality department, we all have the same view of that supplier. We have one global platform for supplier management with common processes using common tools. So using the LiveSource sys cards and supplier profile, tooling, item and bill of material libraries, and contract management, we're able to, again, have one platform where all of our supplier management is done, and every buyer within Dana has the same view of that supplier. And lastly, we needed to be flexible enough to adjust to regional business needs, but control over compliance and global standards, meaning that the system allows us to account for local needs, business unit needs, customer needs, but then also employ global standards. So when it comes to things like conflict minerals or feasibility studies in RFQs, there can be a global standard that everyone adheres to within the Dana purchasing group. So next, I'd like to hand it back to our moderator, Megan.
Sure, thank you. I'm going to go through our various questions on today's webinar. Thank you to both Bo and Chris for your presentations so far. I'd like to remind and encourage everyone in the audience to submit questions at any time by typing into the space provided on your screen. All questions that are not discussed in the question and answer segment can be answered by representatives of LiveSource at a later time. So my first question here is for Chris. How did Dana approach the global rollout to employees and suppliers?
So originally when we launched LiveSource, we sat down and we had a one-week working session between Dana internal stakeholders, which were a cross-functional team, not just from purchasing, but quality, legal, finance, and the LiveSource team. We mapped out the training and the launch process for both suppliers and our internal plants. It was a relatively smooth process. It took about 3 to 4 months to load all of our suppliers. We manage every production supplier that we have globally. We gathered our supplier contacts, and LiveSource helped us with the supplier enablement side of things. And then Dana took care of the buyer side or the Dana side of things with training for all of our buyers globally. It is a relatively smooth process. Again, being flexible enough to customize the system for the local needs, but then also manage our global standards was an easy process for us to roll out. And training in each LiveSource being in each region, training with the local Dana people was done over about a 3-month period.
Okay, great. Yeah, I was going to follow up and ask about that, whether the training included that 3-month period, and it sounds like it did.
Yes.
So for Bo, kind of following up on that, what recommendations would you offer to a new customer who is implementing the LiveSource system?
Thank you, Megan. Well, much like what Chris said, I think you just have to understand that with any enterprise solution rollout, it's really a change management initiative, which typically means you need to have good executive sponsorship supporting it. But then, as Dana did, they had a really good group of representatives from their different business units. These were people that understood the business process they were trying to address. But they also had, I would say, people that understood process redesign or reengineering. because what you want to avoid is trying to turn around and automate your current processes, which may be slave to spreadsheets. So you've got to be able to think out of how you're doing something today and figure out how you can make it actually more efficient through a system. So moving from manual to automation, takes that kind of thought process. That's it.
Next question is for Chris. How important and difficult was it to integrate Dana OneSource with your other internal enterprise systems?
From an important standpoint, for Dana, it was very important. Through a lot of the different data that we collect through LiveSource, most importantly being what we collect in our sys cards, we bring back over 400 different attributes back into our internal analytics system. So again, these are common questions that are all asked to all suppliers globally. That gives us kind of the basis for everything that we do and how we manage our suppliers, right from risk to compliance. And then from how easy was it to implement that integration? Very simple. I think through the use of APIs, working with LiveSource technical team, we were able to pair them up with our IT team, and it was a fairly simple process of developing the API and bringing back different data attributes from LiveSource.
Bo, from a LiveSource perspective, how well does a solution like this work for non-automotive companies, and do you have any specific examples?
Yes, that's a good question. Our primary focus is in transportation and automotive, but we have customers across, heavy industry, A&D, even medical devices. What they all have in common is they are highly dependent upon their direct material suppliers to provide them highly engineered parts. So if you have that kind of relationship with suppliers, then this type of solution is a good fit.
Chris, now that you have the system in place at Dana, how easy is it to incorporate changes driven by the business or by new regulations in the industry?
I would say it's fairly simple. One of the reasons we like LiveSource is because it is flexible. A lot of the items are template-based, so if it's anything from RFQs and we have something that's driven by the business that we want to add into our RFQs, or say a new regulation like conflict minerals or Proposition 65, if there's a question that we want to make sure that globally we're asking all of our suppliers in every RFQ, it's very simple to update the templates and push those out to the business. It can be done centrally or locally, depending on how you set up the system. As Bo mentioned earlier, when there's new regulations like IATF that come into play, it was fairly simple to update the system and be able to track our suppliers to that as well. So very flexible and fairly easy from our standpoint.
Interesting. So, Chris, can you elaborate on how the quality management system has effectively improved your supplier quality, and in particular, is this proven through your KPIs?
Yes, definitely. So a couple different ways that the quality management has improved. So given that we have in LiveSource all of our global production suppliers and contacts in our collaboration with those suppliers already, it was a perfect fit for quality to follow up on that. So we now have, given we had one source of truth globally for all of our production suppliers, we now have one source of truth for all of our quality and nonconformances. So what that allows us to do is instead of having separate systems for quality where purchasing people could not have visibility into those systems, whether you're in quality or purchasing, you now have full visibility into all the nonconformities, all the quality issues at that supplier. No matter where you sit in Dana around the world, you have that single view into that supplier. And we have seen, we do bring that data back into our analytics as well. We're able to run analytics and KPIs on all of our suppliers. All the attributes we collect within LiveSource is put into a supplier scorecard, which quality is part of that. So yes, we have seen our PPMs and incidents with suppliers go down over the course of the last 5 years by being able to effectively manage those. And then secondly, we're able to apply some of those quality standards. So if we have poor performing suppliers, we're able to, stop buyers from giving RFQs to them or awarding business to them. And if they do have poor performance, it'll affect their scorecards with us. And when they go to source, obviously, it's one of the considerations we make in awarding new business.
Okay. Now, this next question is for Bo, although I think I would also be interested in hearing what Chris thinks about it, in particular in regards to automotive, but also in a more general sense. So, Bo, how do you see your industry evolving over the next couple of years?
Interesting question. Our focus has been to date, moving more of these disparate processes that are in spreadsheets back into the application. The goal is not only to stream the processes, but it's be able to get all of this data in one place because there's so much analytics that can be done from there. But beyond that, where we're seeing some interesting movement is around IoT, and specifically putting IoT devices on tools that are sitting either in our customer plants or in their supplier plants. And if you think about that for a moment, if you actually had a window into your suppliers when they were using your tools, what the cycle times were, comparing their cycle, comparing the number of parts they produce to the parts that they ship to, you could really gain a tremendous amount of visibility into how the suppliers are really supporting your business. We've actually done some experiments with some customers, and I would hope to think that maybe as we get into Q1 of next year, we'll actually have a production system up and running there. Chris, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I would agree, Bo. We're actually doing some testing with LiveSource right now on the IoT for tooling, but I just think along the same lines. I think data, if you read anything in the industry, whether it be for purchasing or any function, data is the next evolution with any of the functions. So I think the more information that we can collect on our suppliers and be able to manage our suppliers through automation, not manually and through spreadsheets, like Bo said, I think that's where we see the next few years of how do we utilize the amount of data that we collect, and how do we improve on KPIs like the quality question, and how do we utilize that data to look for the abnormalities or drive value back into the business. So I think over the next few years it's going to be all about the data and how we use it.
And I do like, Bo, in particular, that you did give specific examples and how to use that data, because I think that's something that manufacturers are asking right now is, if we have all of this data, what do we actually do with it? And I think you gave some concrete examples there. So our next question is regarding Dana. So did Dana have template standardized processes for things like RFQ, PPAP, or 8D implemented prior to the rollout of LiveSource? And maybe you can talk a little bit about how those changed.
Yes. So my answer is yes and no. We did have some standard template language that we were using for RFQs, PPAP, and 8D. One of the things that LiveSource, again, what we liked about it so much when we implemented it was flexible. So those things that we wanted to standardize across all of Dana and all regions, we were able to build that into our templates. But it's also flexible enough to allow for local or maybe commodity-specific templates as well. So on the RFQ side, we have many templates built now for, whether it's forgings and castings or stampings that are very specific to that commodity, but they all contain, standard questions on conflict minerals or feasibility studies, things that Dana wants to know on every single RFQ. From PPAP and 8D, across Dana, we probably had several different versions of what people were using. So from a standardization standpoint, we were able to choose one format for PPAP, one format for our 8Ds, and roll that out with LiveSource. And now, everybody globally uses the same format. And there are industry standards depending on what industry you're in, but for Dana, AIA, GA, we were able to standardize on, PPAP and 8D formats across the company.
Chris, is there anything that you'd like to add about that?
Nope, nothing from here.
Okay. That does bring us to the end of our audience questions. So if anyone has last-minute questions, you can put them in now. But otherwise, I would like to see whether, Bo and Chris, whether you just have any final thoughts about the presentation or anything that you feel maybe we didn't quite cover enough that you'd like to add.
Chris?
The only thing that comes to mind from my side, I think, is as we talked a little bit about the future in data, I think from Dana and probably from LiveSource as well, we're always interested in what value we can help drive with the supplier as well. So not only how can we use the data that we collect, but how can our suppliers use the data and use the tools as well to better improve their business and improve their collaboration with us. I think as we start to use tools like LiveSource, I think that collaboration between both customer and supplier, how we can do that better in the future and drive value into both sides ultimately helps all of our customers. So.
Great.
Yeah,
all right. Well, thank you for. Oh, I'm sorry. Did Bo? Were you saying something?
Yeah. Yeah, I would just to go off of what Chris said there. I agree with the concept of the data and support suppliers. With 80 of a platform like this, 80% of the users are actually your suppliers, which is great from a standpoint that now you have suppliers putting the data in for you instead of sending you spreadsheets that you got to type it back in. But it also puts a lot of pressure on both the company implementing it as well as the vendor. Is that you've got to make this something that the suppliers are willing to use and willing to invest. They have to see that this is saving them time, and they have to see that they're getting value from it. So I think the IoT is a good example of how that can happen, because now all of a sudden they can get a view into their production performance on tools that they've never had before, or share with them maintenance schedules on tools. So anything that we can do to kind of help bring the suppliers along and make this a win for them, I think is going to make for success will improve the success of our customers as well. That's it. Thank you.
This concludes our webinar for today. So thank you to everyone for attending, and a special thank you to our great speakers, Bo Hagler and Chris Dawson, and to our sponsor, LiveSource. You can look for an email with a link to access this webinar on demand within the next couple of days. I have been Megan Krause. Thank you for attending, and have a wonderful day.